Alright, g'day everyone and welcome back to the channel. Wanted to make a bit of a video about the collapse of masculinity, the collapse of male society, and I've identified a few reasons that I wanted to share today, but most importantly, the focus of the video is the solution. And it's funny because this actually came out of a presentation that I gave to a young boys group, so about 8 to 14 years old, that we started here, and it's about the importance of the hero archetype, and more specifically, or more technically, the standard that we have as men and that we're called to strive for, right? The archetype. And there are many ways that society has sort of collapsed this or undermined this out of our mimetic structure. And I've written some of these down here, which I'm going to share from you, but as much as we can blame things like feminism, pornography, video games, which are all terrible scourges on humanity, and I've talked about some of that before in my other videos, but ultimately it's the loss of the standard. And that's why men feel so directionless. You'll hear words like that thrown around, lack of friendship, lack of brotherhood. And in some ways, that is a symptom of there being no direction. There's no shared direction. There's no individual direction. Society, modern society, undermines the foundations that were previously here. Obviously, the internet has allowed us to, I guess, outsource a lot of our previous social interactions and whatnot, but that's a separate issue. More practically and more physically, geographically, you can live wherever, you move wherever, you leave your hometown, obviously to go study, you move somewhere else for a job, but you don't really have geographical roots. Your family tends to be smaller. You don't live around extended family. You're not tied to a specific community. Even when we look at jobs, I don't really hear of many people, following a career pathway and really going into that, giving their all, growing, starting a business. There's not so much of that apprenticeship pathway. You just sort of get a job, you make some money, you move around. In terms of marriage and family, obviously that's been pushed back statistically till a lot later on, to your 30s, late 30s, if it ends up happening at all. Don't have too many kids, maybe don't have kids at all, you can't afford them. And hopefully when you're hearing that, you're getting a sense of the pattern is that there's not much holding you down, right? There's not much grounding, there's not much stability, there's not much foundation. It's all very fluid and ambiguous. You can do whatever you want. You can be whatever you want to be. But Peterson has this great line. He's like, when you tell a teenager that you're just fine the way you are, and this teenager is struggling with depression, he's struggling with anxiety, he doesn't like the way he looks, well, he doesn't want to be told that because he may not know who he wants to be, right? He may not have an idea of that hero archetype yet, but he's damn sure that he doesn't like who he is right now. So what we've stripped away, in I guess an attempt to maximize individual liberty, to maximize freedom, I don't know, to maximize personal satisfaction, finding it and whatever the heck you want, we've lost the objective standard. And the reason that this is so crippling to young men and men overall, because this is not just something that's a problem with young men, it's really a problem with a lot of the older generations as well, is that we've lost the archetype, the standard to strive for. Now, we can talk about the archetype of Christ, who is, of course, the ultimate archetype, but I think it's also important to keep our heroes, the heroes of fiction. Perhaps it's a sports hero, historical heroes, but these heroes are so important to talk about and consider because they're closer to us, right? They're close to us to grasp. Why do we like superheroes? Why do we like Batman and Superman? Because they have strength, nobility, character, dignity. They're capable men, but they also use that in the service of others, right? They use that for the sake of justice. They use their talents, so to speak, to provide for others. I'm a big fan of the Batman trilogy by Christopher Nolan, but there's a very small scene in there I can't remember in which one, but he's talking to these orphans because Batman, obviously he goes around fighting crime and saving Gotham, but he also bankrolls a orphanage for young men who don't have parents. And that was an example of him using his wealth, the talents that were bestowed upon him to completely serve others. And he obviously wasn't getting any sort of satisfaction or reward or even recognition out of paying this orphanage. And that's part of the role that he plays in the movie, is like trying to get people to think that he's just some rich party boy, because that allows him to keep his Batman identity hidden. But that self gift, right? I'm a huge fan also of literature. I love Tolkien, but I was also particularly struck reading the Odyssey when I was younger. And obviously Odysseus has his shortcomings, but he also has great virtue, and he shows emotion as a man, and he's a great embodiment of what it looks like for a man to be like emotionally and physically developed. And he obviously goes back and reclaims his homeland, Ithaca, and saves his wife Penelope from the suitors. But all of this to say, and we're still just talking about heroes, is that the hero gives someone an ideal to strive for. What's a more modern one? Star Wars, Luke Skywalker, right? He's fighting against the Empire. He's building the rebellion. He's a leader. These people, when we compare ourselves to them, because an ideal is a judge, right? Because we're judging ourselves in comparison to the ideal. When we look at the ideal of Luke Skywalker, when we look at the ideal of Aragorn, when we look at the ideal of Batman, we say, what would they have done in this situation? When I'm tired, when I'm feeling like crap, when I feel like lying, when I feel like compromising my integrity, what would Aragorn have done in this situation? And it might sound silly. I'm a 24-year-old guy talking about heroes, but I'm convicted that this is the reason why they have such a strong role in our culture, notwithstanding that the stories themselves are good, but they serve as a reference point for our action. So you can take the idea of a hero. The hero is an embodied standard, right? It's an embodied version of that truth. But then what's the truth above that? What's the standard? Well, the standard is the life of virtue. And that's what all of these heroes are living in their own ways. And any protagonist has his shortfalls, and we see that in the movies and in the books. But there's a standard that they're embodying which we're called to live. And this is what young men in particular need to grasp onto and hold, because as I said at the start, society seeks to undermine and take this away from us. But what are the virtues of manhood? What are the virtues of masculinity? What are the attributes of true, authentic male leadership? And you need to start getting the answers to those questions. Let's discuss some of them. Strength. Well, why would strength be important? Because it helps us fulfill our role as a protector of our families, of our communities, of our parish. It allows us also to provide and be diligent at our work, to have energy, to fuel our bodies correctly, be productive in the physical sense of the word. Strength is an important virtue. It's an important attribute that we must cultivate and grow as men. We're not born strong. Obviously, we are born stronger than women, and that's a hint as to our nature, but that's something that must be developed. Why would wisdom and prudence be something important? We want to be able to make the right decisions. We want to be able to act justly. We want to be able to discern truth and good from evil. Temperance. Why would temperance be important? Well, having strength and having attributes and having capability, having a sword, well, we want to know when we should actually use it or when we should keep it sheathed. We have concupiscent desires. We have very strong desires of the flesh, of gluttony, of lust, of anger. The virtue of temperance helps us not just shut down and subdue these things, but how do we channel them? What is righteous anger? How do I channel my sexual desire into a procreative relationship with one woman and start a family, as opposed to letting that run rampant. So there's all of these ways that the standard of the hero, who has self-control, who has strength, who has wisdom, who has all of these virtues, we look through the hero. We can live and embody and strive for the hero at a very basic level. Of course, Christ is the ultimate example of this. But then we also can extrapolate from that, if you will. We can dilute those objective standards which we're called to pursue. In terms of like career and finance, well, what is a standard? Why would men think that they have to have their finances in order as a young man? Well, because you want to be able to provide for a family, and maybe not just a family, but you want to be able to give back to your community and your parish. All right, well, that means that I've got to have savings. I want to have some property. I want to eventually look at starting a business. And that's a financial standard that me as a 20-year-old dude, as a 24-year-old dude, I can say, okay, what are the steps? What position do I need to be in to get to the point where I do own property and I do have a business and I am able to contribute and give back to different people and different projects? And keeping those standards in mind, the financial standard, the physical standard, the spiritual standard, of course, the leadership standard. When I wake up now on a Monday morning and I have those standards and those ideals in mind, my day-to-day action is now informed because I know what I'm aiming for. I have the aim, I have the goal. Now, for me, as a 24-year-old guy in New Zealand, as a dairy farmer, that's going to look different from some dude living in California, from some dude living in Europe or in the Middle East. It's going to look different for all of us. But because the hero is universal, because these standards are universal, all we have to do is just simply connect the dot from me to the ideal. How do I get from this to that in my specific situation? And that's really the argument of the video, is that with the fall of the hero, with the fall of these objective standards, you do you, it's all subjective. We have some vague values, but there's nothing beyond that. You lose, I guess, life itself. You lose direction, right? You lose the structure. And yeah, I won't talk about it now, but obviously it's not just these things of modern society, all the distractions, the doom scrolling, the pornography, all of these things just, I guess they act as facilitators, right? They facilitate men to just continue ignoring the voice of reason, the voice of conscience, the voice of responsibility, the burning bush that Moses saw in Exodus that called him to liberate his people from slavery. When you're stuck in that cycle of video games, of lust, of junk food, etc., it allows you to ignore that call. And we're really living in the fruit of, well, especially now, and I think it's only going to get worse, right? Because we're living on the momentum of the previous generations, but we're going to be living in the fruit of generations of men who ignored the call. And yeah, we have enough, you could say, we have enough success, we have enough money in the bank stored up that we've sort of been getting along fine, but eventually we're going to run out of steam. And we're going to see actually it's a huge problem when majority of the male population has been denuted and has no testosterone, has no drive, has no ambition. They just want to take their paycheck and go home and watch Netflix. Anyway, I won't talk too much about that, but this is the recovery path, guys. We've got to recover the hero. We've got to recover the idea of nobility, of kingship, of the philosopher king. And we need to instantiate this in the world, okay? We can't be ashamed of this, because this is our calling. This is our calling to heroic virtue, to sainthood. And it's dependent upon each of us answering that call in order to make a difference, yeah? So yeah, that's basically all from me. Christ is the ultimate model of all of these virtues. You could say I was looking at those two levels of the hero and the standard, and Christ is both, right? Because he's truth incarnate. So he's really the epitome of all of this. But that's my call to action to you. You can check out my other videos for more specifics on how to start living this. For example, I did a video on the Philosopher King. I did a video on biblical patriarch morning routine. That would be a good place to start if you're like, all right, brother, you've sold me. I need to get my shit together. How do I start? Start with the mornings. Start praying every day. Start your day on your knees. Get in the gym. Fix your diet. Start reclaiming your thumos. Start getting that energy back. And you can see in that video, it's still up there. Circles of influence. The quicker that you can master yourself and grow in self-possession, the more quickly you'll be able to expand your circle of influence. Now, I did promise one of my listeners, Father, I'm sure you're watching this video, wanted to do a longer breakdown of what self-possession truly looks like. So I think that'll be the next video this week. But hopefully you enjoyed it. If you wanted to join a community of Christian brothers who are growing in the hero archetype and are seeking to develop these virtues, join us at the Legion. We have weekly coaching calls. We've got one on tonight, which should be great. Accountability. We do some formation every week. We'll watch a bit of a video or have a presentation, and you can just get around some other guys who are getting after it. And finally, of course, if you wanted to explore working with me one-on-one, there'll be a link down here in the description where you can read a few more details, send me an email, send me an application, and we can chat about it further. But with that, appreciate you guys watching. Keep getting after it, and may God bless you.